Marcus Cole pushed open the door to yesterday's treasures and was greeted by a rush of cool, stale air. Dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight that slipped through a cracked window pane. The shop's neon sign blinked on and off, sputtering like a dying heartbeat. Shelves sagged under the weight of chipped porcelain figurines, yellowed paperbacks, and faded postcards. He wandered past rows of vinyl records, some buried under piles of tangled cassette tapes, and he reached a narrow aisle of electronics. Dozens of radios, portable TVs, and rotary phones leaned against one another, their cords coiled haphazardly. Marcus's fingers traced the dusty tops of devices until they came to rest on an old-fashioned answering machine. The machine was heavy and rectangular, its plastic casing dulled by time. The buttons were yellowed, the small speaker grill bore scratches, a faded label read Voice Master Trays Mew, a thick, cloth-wrapped cord snaked out from its back. It looked like something from a 1980s sitcom, an artifact of a simpler era when people relied on tapes instead of pixels. Marcus lifted the machine, testing its weight. It felt solid. His reflection stared back at him in the shopkeeper's cracked mirror. Tidy hair, collared shirt, tie slightly askew. Just another office drone looking for a cheap curiosity. He felt a sudden jolt of something, nostalgia maybe, or a strange tug of anticipation. A squeaky voice called from behind, "Find something you like." Marcus turned. An elderly woman with frail shoulders and wire-rimmed glasses smiled at him. She held a cloth ready to dust trinkets. Her voice was soft, as if she spoke too loudly already. "This," he said, holding up the answering machine, "it still works." She studied it. "I think so. Haven't tested in weeks though. Someone left it here, a long-forgotten model. You can have it for $10. Marcus frowned. $10 seemed a steal. He glanced around. There was no newer model in sight. "Sold," he said. He fished in his pocket for crumpled bills and handed them over. The woman wrapped the machine in a stained cloth and placed it in a brown paper bag. "Enjoy," she whispered. "If it speaks, listen carefully." Marcus paused, bag in hand. "Speaks." She set down her cloth. They said at once, captured a voice that shouldn't have been there. "But that's just shop talk." She tapped her temple. "Stories help sell a story, you know." He smiled politely and edged toward the door. Outside, afternoon traffic hummed. The air smelled of exhaust and hot pavement. He walked to his car, parked 2 blocks down, and loaded the answering machine into the back seat. It felt unreal to own such a relic. At home, Marcus lived alone in a modest apartment on the 3rd floor of a brick building. The walls were painted a neutral beige. The furniture was functional but uninspiring. He placed the answering machine on a small side table next to an IKEA lamp. A tangle of cables peeked out from a surge protector. He unplugged an old digital clock radio and plugged the Voice Master 3000 inches into the same outlet. He lifted the handset of his wall-mounted phone and plugged its cord into the machine's jack. The phone line crackled to life. He pressed the play button. A mechanical whir filled the room as the tape inside began to spin. The machine announced message 1 in a tinny digitized voice. A woman's voice followed, clear but distant. "Hey Marcus, it's Jen. Just calling to remind you about dinner tomorrow. Call me back." The name startled him. He ran a hand through his hair. He didn't know a Jen. No one had called him on this line in years. He pressed play again. Message 2, a man's voice. "Yeah, Mike, I got the files. Thanks for sending them over. I'll check tonight." Mike. He worked in an office, but he didn't know a Mike either. He frowned. The third message was filled with static. The machine paused mid-playback, then resumed. A low, raspy whisper said, "Don't," and then cut off. Marcus leaned forward. He hit rewind and play. The whisper repeated, "Don't answer the door." His heart thumped. He strained to listen, but the tape ended before the words could continue. The machine clicked and announced end of messages. Marcus unhooked the handset and stared at the silent machine. His pulse pulsed in his temples. He leaned back on the couch, the paper bag now empty on the table. The room felt too quiet. Outside, the sun dipped below the rooftops. He picked up his phone and dialed the number on the wall. Jack. No dial tone. He tried again. Nothing. The line was dead. He glanced at the answering machine's tape counter. It sat at 3. Exactly the number of messages he'd just heard. A tremor of unease crept through him. He'd come home for a quiet evening and found himself listening to voices he didn't recognize. And a warning that made no sense. He hadn't heard any knock. He wasn't expecting anyone. He stood and went to the front door. He checked the peephole. Empty hallway. No one there. He locked the deadbolt. The scratch of metal on metal sounded louder than he expected. Back in the living room, he looked at the machine. Its buttons gleamed under the lamp's soft light. "Don't answer." The door. He pressed his fingertips to his lips. What did it mean? He reached for the handset once more. Slowly, he pressed play again. The tinny voice of the machine whirred. Again, message 1. Again, those unknown names. His skin prickled. He pressed fast forward, but the machine bucked and the lights on its display blinked out. A low hum emanated from its speaker. The tape abruptly stopped. Silence fell. Marcus exhaled. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the machine as if it might spring to life on its own. His mind buzzed with questions. Where had those voices come from? Why did the shopkeeper mention voices that shouldn't be there? He reached for his phone and scrolled through his contacts. No Mike, no Jen. He stared at the black screen. A single voicemail icon glowed on his modern smartphone, a text from his boss confirming tomorrow's meeting. Normal. He pocketed the phone and stood. The lamp's bulb flickered once. He shrugged and turned it off. Darkness swallowed the room. He headed to his bedroom, the answering machine's bag slung over his shoulder. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd return it if it still gave him trouble. But for now, he needed sleep. He crawled under the covers, the apartment silent again. He stared at the ceiling, eyes wide. The words echoed in his mind. Don't answer the door. Sleep came slowly. Outside, the building's pipes groaned. At exactly 2:13 a.m., a soft click sounded in the living room, the answering machine powering on by itself. In the silence that followed, Marcus shifted in his sleep, unaware that his quiet evening had already crossed a line he could never uncross. Marcus awoke the following morning to a dull ache behind his eyes. Morning light filtered through thin curtains, dust motes drifting in its glow. He blinked, staring up at the pale ceiling, and blinked again, as if reminding himself that last night's oddity was over. The apartment felt normal, no unexpected sounds, no low hums. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed and stood. His feet met the cool wood floor. He stretched, feeling the stiffness in his back, and trudged toward the living room, coffee on his mind. The answering machine sat on the side table, still, plugged in. Its display read 0 o'clock, as if refusing to keep count of time. Marcus frowned. Did it reset itself overnight? He lifted the handset, intending to test the phone jack, but remembered the line was dead. He tapped the play button instead. The tape inside began to click and whir. A disembodied robotic voice announced, "Message 1. Marcus leaned forward. He half expected silence. Instead, a clear voice spoke. "Hello, is anyone there? Please call me back. I think someone's watching me." A woman's voice, shaky but urgent. Marcus frowned. The message ended abruptly, replaced by the machine's eerie static hiss. It felt like listening to someone trapped in another world. He pressed play again. Message to. A man's calm tone said, "Hey Marcus, it's Mike, your new neighbor from 4B. I borrowed your lawnmower yesterday. Thanks for leaving it out. I'll bring it back tonight." Marcus's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Mike from 4B. He lived alone. The apartment next door for B had been vacant for 6 months. He'd never met a Mike. He pressed rewind and listened again. Every syllable was unmistakable. A neighbor borrowing his mower. He swallowed. His apartment didn't even have a lawn. The building had no shared yard. His heart drummed. He hit play a third time. Message 3. Static, then a low, insistent voice, almost a whisper. "Don't pick up. She's not alone." The machine clicked to silence. Marcus's pulse thundered. He pressed pause, lifted the handset and pressed play again. The whisper repeated, "Don't pick up. She's not alone." No additional context. No indication of who she might be or who might be listening at their door. He slid off the couch and paced the small living room. The lamp cast long shadows on the walls. Marcus's coffee mug lay half full on the coffee table, cool now. Nerves jangled through him. His logical mind raced for explanations. Malfunction, someone's idea of a prank, but the voices were far too specific and far too personal. He looked at the machine. Plastic buttons, tarnished chrome lettering. Play, rewind, fast forward, delete. No record. It was strictly playback. Where had these messages been recorded and by whom? He picked up his smartphone and clicked his voicemail app. The screen displayed one unheard message from his boss. As he'd expected, he pressed play, a polite reminder about the morning meeting. Ordinary, boring, completely normal. He tapped to delete it and sat back down. He needed to think clearly. He pressed fast forward on the answering machine. The tape jumped, spat, fragments of static and ghostly halting phrases. "Dark, not safe, please, let me in." He hit rewind, then play. The fragments appeared again, bit by bit, as though the machine fought to hide half its memory. Marcus leaned in until his face was inches from the speaker. He whispered, "Who are you?" Only hiss and faint mechanical whine replied. His palms felt sweaty. He rose and went to the small kitchenette. He poured himself another mug of coffee, black and bitter. The aroma grounded him, reminded him this was his home. He carried the cup back to the side table and set it down carefully. The machine's tape counter flickered at 05. Though he wasn't sure White had counted 3 messages before, he stared at the display. 5 seconds of tape had been played during that fragmented forward. It suggested there were more messages buried somewhere, waiting to be uncovered. Marcus took a deep breath. He pressed fast forward again, watching the tape counter ascend. 10, 11, 12. The machine hummed, then abruptly halted. The robotic message 6 crackled through. "This is me, or at least, a version of me. I don't know how to explain the future. I don't know who's at the door. But please listen, don't let it in. Whoever it is, she's lost. And so am I." The words sent a bolt through Marcus's chest, a version of him, a future self, recording a warning. His mind reeled. This was impossible. He pressed pause and shook his head. The tape remained alive. Buttons lit up. He scanned his apartment door, its peephole black and silent. He crossed to the hallway wall, listening nothing. The building's quiet morning ambience hummed through the thin walls. Normal life continued. Distant sirens, the rumble of a garbage truck on the street below. His breathing steadied. He forced himself to think logically. The messages had timestamps that were erased by the tape's auto-reset feature. He had no way to know when they were recorded. They could have been laid down decades ago by someone else. But then why did they speak of his reality, his neighbor, his toaster, his door? He leaned back in his chair, cupping his coffee. Confronted with the machine's inexplicable warnings, he realized he had two choices: ignore it and hope nothing happened, or treat the messages as genuine and prepare for whatever might come. He stood, drained the remainder of his coffee, and carried the mug to the sink. His reflection in the black window pane stared back at him, eyes dark with worry. He washed the mug slowly, foam running down the drain. When he turned back, the answering machine's play button glowed softly as if inviting him to press it again. He felt the weight of curiosity battling the prickling dread at the back of his neck. He stepped toward the table, finger hovering above the button. The coffee's warmth lingered on his fingertips. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then, with steady resolve, he pressed play once more. Marcus lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan blades rotating lazily above him. His mind buzzed with the strange messages from the answering machine. Sleep felt out of reach. He shifted under the thin blanket, pulled the covers up to his chin, and closed his eyes. 2:13 a.m. A soft click broke the silence. Marcus's eyes snapped open. He sat up, heart pounding. Somewhere in the living room, the answering machine had powered on by itself. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed and padded down the hallway, in his socks. The floorboards creaked under each step. He flicked on the hallway light and rounded the corner. The lamp in the living room glowed, casting long shadows on the walls. The answering machine sat on the side table, its display brightly lit. 0 o'clock. A thin mist of static hissed from the speaker. Marcus swallowed. "Hello," he whispered, his voice shaking. The room answered only with the machine's faint hum. He reached out and pressed play. The tape whirred to life, the robotic voice announcing, "Message 1. His breath caught. A soft, breathy whisper emerged. "I'm here. I see you. You shouldn't have come and now you can't leave." Marcus's skin prickled. He leaned closer. The whisper faded into static, then returned, just as urgent. "Don't turn around. She's right behind you." He froze, finger hovering over the pause button. He dared not look away from the machine, dared not risk what might be lurking in the shadows behind him. Seconds passed, but the machine clicked off. The robotic voice intoned, "End of messages." Marcus's heart pounded in his ears. He pressed rewind, then play again. The tape counter ticked backward until it landed on 06. The same whisper played again. "Don't turn round, she's right behind you." He swallowed hard and looked around the room. The sofa cushions lay empty. The coffee table stood clear. Shadows pooled in the corners, but he saw nothing except the faint outline of the curtained window and the lamp's soft glow. He tried the phone jack, still dead. He reached for the handset and tapped it against his palm. "Marcus," he whispered to himself, "this is ridiculous." He pressed fast forward to clear the rest of the tape. The machine groaned, spitting out more fragments of static, and muffled voices can't escape. Hear her coming. He hit stop. The machine fell silent. The only sound his rapid breathing. Marcus crossed to the window and peered through the crack in the curtains. The city lights flickered in the distance. No movement in the courtyard below. No sign of anyone watching him. He turned back to the answering machine. His reflection in the dark window stared eyes wide with fear. He blinked twice, rubbing his temples. He needed air. He backed toward the front door, but paused at the peephole. He studied the hallway empty. He unlocked the deadbolt, opened the door a crack, and stuck his head out into the corridor. Dim fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The hallway was silent. Even the distant hum of traffic was muted. He closed the door and locked it again. When he returned to the living room, the answering machine had powered off. The display was blanked, or he pressed power. The display lit up again at 0 o'clock. He reached out a trembling hand and pressed play. He needed answers. He needed to understand what the machine was doing, why it recorded messages about him, about someone unseen. The tape whirred, then clicked to message 1. But this time, a new sound joined the whisper. A faint, metallic tapping, like fingernails drumming against wood. "Stop. Turn away." And then the whisper of a woman's breath, close and ragged. Marcus's blood ran cold. The machine clicked off mid-sentence. The lights on its display flickered out. Marcus stepped back, nearly stumbling. He felt the walls close in. The room felt smaller, tighter. The answering machine sat silent and still as if it had never spoken. He backed into the hallway and flicked off the living room lamp. Darkness swallowed him. He pressed himself against the cool wall and closed his eyes, willing his racing heart to slow. After several minutes, he opened his eyes and took a deep breath. He couldn't stay here. He needed to think. He needed to figure out what to do with that machine before it drove him mad or worse. He returned to the bedroom, careful to avoid looking at the living room doorway. He crawled under the covers and pulled the blanket up high. His mind whirled with whispers, warnings, and that metallic tapping. It echoed in his skull. He stared into the darkness. Sleep might never come, but exhaustion claimed him first. In the empty living room, the answering machine sat motionless, its secrets locked away on that tape, whispering promises of dread yet to come. Marcus woke with a start, drenched in sweat. Early sunlight filtered through his curtains, painting the bedroom walls in pale gold. His head throbbed, memory of last night's whispers still alive in his bones. He sat up, eyes unfocused, and reached for the little digital clock on his nightstand. 7:28 a.m. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and pushed himself to his feet. His apartment felt unnaturally quiet. No hum of traffic, no distant voices. He wondered if the building was empty or if everyone else had simply learned to stay silent. In the living room, the answering machine waited on its side table like a silent sentinel. Marcus's heart clenched as he stepped closer. The display read 0 o'clock unchanged. He lifted the handset and pressed play. A mechanical whir cut through the stillness. The machine announced, "Message 1. A familiar voice followed his own voice, but slow, warped, distant, as if coming from the bottom of a well. "I can't find my keys. I've looked everywhere." The doorbell, it rang 3 times, but I didn't answer. Marcus's breathing hitched. He'd left for work this morning right on time, locking the door behind him. His keys had been in his pocket, and nobody had rung his bell. He pressed rewind, then play again. The voice continued, footsteps in the hallway, too soft to be a neighbor. I don't know who's there. I'm so tired." He froze. His pulse pounded. He'd felt tired. Yes, deep exhaustion, but the rest was impossible. He checked the clock, 7:30 a.m., just 2 minutes after he'd sat up. There'd been no time for another message. He hit fast forward, but the tape jolted and the display flickered to message. He hadn't heard that many messages yet. He pressed play. The tape hit the new message. "If you're listening to this, it's too late. She slipped inside. I can hear her breathing behind the door. Marcus, please don't open it." His stomach twisted. He was listening, and it wasn't too late yet. He stood unsteady and looked at his front door. His mind spun. A warning from himself describing events that hadn't even happened, or had they? He rose on shaky legs and crossed to the door. He pressed his forehead against its cool wood. No sound from the hallway, only the soft hum of his refrigerator. He exhaled slowly, then turned back to the answering machine. He pressed fast forward again. The tape groaned as it advanced. The display blinked to message 5. He braced himself and pressed play. This message sputtered with static before resolving into his voice once more. "I'm sorry, I tried to warn you. I don't know who she is, but she's wearing my face. Don't let her in." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. "She's wearing my face." He shook his head, gripping the edge of the table. His reflection flickered in the dark window pane behind the machine. Tired eyes, drawn cheeks. He closed his eyes and pressed stop. His mind raced. Recordings from the future, could that even be real? Or was someone playing a twisted prank, splicing recordings of him with ominous warnings? But who would have access to his voice, his apartment, the exact timing of his life? He sank into the couch, head in his hands. The unanswered question swirled. Why was he hearing these messages now? Why did they describe his reality so precisely? And who was the mysterious she, his doppelganger perhaps? He took a deep breath and reached for his phone. He dialed work, his voice cracking as he left a message. "Hey, it's Marcus. I'm not feeling well. Going to take the day. Sorry for the inconvenience." He hung up and set the phone aside. He needed help, but he couldn't tell anyone about the answering machine. They would think he was insane. He needed evidence. He stood and walked to his small desk. He grabbed a pen and lined paper. With deliberate strokes, he began to transcribe the messages. Message 1. "I can't find my keys." Doorbell rang 3 times. Message 4. "If you're listening to this, it's too late. Don't open it." Message 5. "She's wearing my face. Don't let her in." He paused. The numbering made no sense. 3 messages he hadn't intended to hear. He scribbled at the bottom. Future voice. He looked back at the machine, its buttons waiting. He swallowed his fear. He needed more messages, more clues. If there were warnings, he had to know what was coming. He pressed fast forward once more. The tape churned. The display flickered to message 7. Marcus closed his eyes and pressed play. A silence stretched before a single, chilling phrase emerged. "Please believe me." Then the tape snapped to silence. Marcus's hand shook. He exhaled, chest tight. He believed him, but belief alone would not save him. He stood and walked to his front window. Daylight spilled across the street below. Cars rolled by. Pedestrians chatted. The world went on, unaware of the messages from the future echoing through his living room. He gripped the windowsill. He knew one thing. He had to prepare. And he had to stay one step ahead of the voice on the voicemail. Marcus stared at the answering machine's dark display, mind racing. He'd believed the warnings. It was impossible to ignore voices from his own future. But belief wouldn't stop what was coming. He needed a plan. Carefully, he powered off the machine and stowed it in a cardboard box. He taped the lid shut and carried it to his bedroom closet, wedging the box behind spare linens. If he couldn't destroy the device, at least he could hide it. By mid-morning, sunlight streamed into the apartment. Marcus showered, dressed in a pressed button-down shirt and slacks, and forced himself to eat a modest breakfast of toast and scrambled eggs. Each bite felt hollow. As he walked to his home office spare room converted into a desk area, he reminded himself that nothing supernatural had happened yet. Rational explanations still lingered: electrical glitches, prank recordings, tape degradation. But the more he forced himself to think logically, the deeper the unease settled in his chest. He booted up his laptop and logged into his company's project management portal. The screen blinked to life. Task lists and deadlines glowed under the soft lamplight. He sucked in a breath and clicked into his work queue. At first, the morning passed without incident. Marcus drafted emails, reviewed spreadsheets, and joined a lunchtime video call. His colleagues chatted about weekend plans and shared cat photos. He smiled politely, but the words felt distant. His gaze flicked repeatedly to the closet door, as if expecting it to open. An hour later, he reached for his coffee mug, a white ceramic cup with a simple blue stripe chipped on one side. He poured fresh coffee, black with a touch of sugar, and returned to his desk. He lifted the mug and sipped, letting the warmth settle his nerves. He glanced at the little digital clock on his desk. 2:13 p.m. He stiffened. At the same time he'd first heard the machine power on in the night. His pulse ticked faster. He shook his head, dismissing the thought. It was just coincidence. He brought the mug back to his desk and clicked on a slide deck as the presentation loaded. His hand nudged the mug, teetered on the edge, and then coffee splashed across his keyboard. A hot wave dripped onto the desk. He yelped and jerked his hand back. The mug toppled, crashing to the floor. It shattered into jagged pieces, sugar-stained coffee spreading like a dark stain. Marcus froze, heart hammering. The exact scenario. From the voicemail: spilled coffee, broken mug. He crouched and picked up a shard, fingers brushing jagged porcelain, his palm pinked with cuts. He breathed in and out. He muttered, that just happened. He cleaned the mess, tossed shards into a paper bag, and poured cold water over his cuts. His reflection in the glossy surface of his laptop screen stared back, pale, wide-eyed, drawn. The tape's predictions had come true. His mind raced. How many more warnings did the machine have, and what did they lead to? He needed to know. He closed his laptop and checked the closet. The cardboard box sat where he left it. The tape recorder was secure inside. He carried the box back to the living room and set it on the side table. His hands trembled as he lifted the lid. Inside lay the Voicemaster 3000, quiet and dark. He unplugged it and carried it to the kitchen sink, running it under cold water. Water seeped into the vents, bubbling where it met electricity. The machine hissed and groaned. He watched as water pooled in the speaker grill. He pressed power, nothing happened. He shook it, listening for rattle, but the tape was stuck. He set it on the counter, unplugged, and went back to his office. An hour later, Marcus felt a dull ache settling in his shoulders. He decided to step outside for fresh air. He grabbed his jacket and keys, making sure the closet door was closed, and locked. Outside, the afternoon air felt warm against his cheeks. He walked to a nearby coffee shop, hoping the change of scenery would clear his mind. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. The barista smiled behind the counter. He ordered a small latte to go, paid, and stepped back onto the sidewalk. He took a deep breath and headed back toward his building. As he rounded the corner, he noticed two men in dark jackets lingering near his entrance. They stood close together, heads bowed in conversation. When Marcus passed, they glanced up. Their eyes were obscured by shadows, but their stare made his skin crawl. He didn't wait to greet them. He gripped the latte and hurried inside, heart thundering. He climbed to the third floor in 2 quick strides and slipped into his apartment, closing the door behind him. He peered through the peephole empty hallway. No sign of the men. He set the latte on his coffee table and exhaled. The warm milk and foam smelled inviting. He lifted the cup for a tentative sip, but his gaze snapped to the closet door. The cut across his palm throbbed. He lowered the cup. He couldn't drink it. He thought, what if the next warning came while he was unconscious? Or if he broke the machine, its tape might erase itself, taking its messages with it. He needed a more permanent record. He dug a notebook from his desk drawer and began to write. He sketched a timeline. 2:13 a.m. Machine powers on by itself. Point 2 message. 1. Unintelligible whisper, I'm here. 3. Message 2. Don't turn around. 4. 3 recorded messages. 5. Message for morning. If you're listening, don't open the door. 6. Message. 5. Morning. She's wearing my face. 7. Coffee spill. 2:13 p.m. predicted by the tape. He paused. He scratched out a half-written sentence. Next. Doorbell. Then he stared at the empty wall across from him. His breathing slowed. He closed the notebook and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He picked up the damaged answering machine and took it to the balcony. He slid the glass door open and carried it onto the narrow ledge. The evening breeze fluttered through his hair. He hurled the machine over the railing. It fell silently, then clattered on the pavement below. He watched until the shards of plastic lay scattered across the concrete. He exhaled. It was gone. No more warnings, no more predictions. He stepped back inside and shut the balcony door. That night, Marcus slept with his apartment door locked and his phone by his side. He lay awake, listening for any whisper, any hardware click, any sound of footsteps, but the night remained silent. He drifted into uneasy dreams, fragments of static voices, echoing warnings, and the faint memory of that masked gaze outside his building. And all the while, he couldn't shake the feeling that destroying the machine had not ended its power, only postponed what was coming next. Marcus awoke before dawn, his body tight with lingering tension. He lay still for a long moment, listening to the muffled hum of the city beyond his curtained window. He had destroyed the answering machine, yet nightly rest remained elusive. Every creak of the pipes, every whisper of wind through the cracks set his nerves on edge. He slipped out of bed and walked to the living room. The space felt cavernous in the pre-dawn gloom. Light from the street lamps filtered in, casting pale rectangles across the floor. He approached the coffee table, his hands unconsciously searching for the remains of his latte cup from yesterday on, ingrained habit from too many mornings of work. Instead, his gaze fell on the notebook tucked under a stack of magazines. He picked it up and flipped to the last page, filled with his hastily scrawled timeline. 1 to 13 a.m. First machine activation. 2. Messages. 1. 3 whispers and predictions. 3. Morning voicemails, future voice warnings. 4. Coffee spill at 2:13 p.m. 5. Machine destroyed. He stared at the last item. Machine destroyed. He'd thought that would end it, yet he couldn't shake the feeling the warnings were far from over. He closed the notebook and carried it to the desk. He switched on his laptop, the screen flickering to life. He opened a fresh document and typed, log, second warning, and left space for details. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. What qualifies as a warning now that the source was gone? He drew a deep breath and pressed a single key. Nothing happened. The cursor blinked at him, impatient. A faint chime broke the silence. Marcus's heart lurched in his chest. He looked up at the hallway door. A soft light glowed beneath it, his smartphone's LED notification shining through the crack. He pushed back his chair and walked to the door. The hallway was dark, save for the tiny green glow at the bottom of his door. He bent to pick it up. A text message, time-stamped 5:47 a.m. It read, Marcus, don't open it. His breath caught. The text bubble shimmered on the screen as though alive. He recognized the font, the style exactly like his own. He stared at the words, pulse racing. The warning was identical. Uppercase, urgent, threatening. The sender was a plus unknown. His mind reeled. The answering machine was gone. Yet the voice had migrated into his phone. Something still had his number, still knew how to reach him, and knew how to terrify him. He pressed his palm to his forehead. His heart thundered. He fumbled for the notebook in his jacket pocket and tore out a fresh page. He wrote, 5:47 a.m. text from unknown, don't open. He paused, pen hovering. What did it refer to this time? The door, the morning, a person. He pocketed the notebook and slid the phone into his back pocket. He turned on the hallway light and opened his apartment door. The corridor lay empty and silent. He stepped out, peered both ways, and saw nothing. No one in sight. No cellophane-wrapped packages. No mysterious objects. He shut the door and relocked the deadbolt, exhaling a shuddering breath. Back inside, he leaned against the door, forehead pressed to the wood, and tried to steady his racing pulse. He needed answers, someone with technical know-how, someone to trace that text. Yet whom could he trust? His friends would think him delusional. The police would laugh him out of the station. He crossed to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. He sipped slowly, the cool liquid soothing the tightness in his chest. He placed the glass on the counter and stared at his reflection in the black window behind the sink. His eyes, rimmed with red, looked haunted, like he'd seen too many things that didn't make sense. He remembered the warning in the message, don't open it. The ambiguity gnawed at him. Could it be the door lifter, or could it be something else? An app, an email, a package? What if he opened an innocuous text sent afterward? What if the next message contained a link, a file, a trap? He returned to his desk and booted up his email account. He scanned his inbox, nothing unusual. No spam, no unknown senders, no attachments. He clicked on his messaging app. The plus unknown number had vanished. The conversation thread was gone, as if it had never existed. Marcus's breath hitched. How, he whispered, how did it disappear? He tapped through the app's settings. No hidden archive, no blocked numbers list. The phone's logs showed no record of the message. It had popped into existence and vanished before any trace remained. He sank into his chair and ran his hands through his hair. The room felt unbearably still. Outside, dawn began to break. A gray light crept over the rooftops beyond his window. He ambled to the balcony and opened the glass door. The cool air rushed in. He leaned on the railing, blinking as he adjusted to the early morning glare. He looked down at the street below. A newspaper delivery scattered pages across the pavement. A cat darted between parked cars. Life continued, indifferent to his nightmare. He closed the balcony door and locked it. He turned back to the room. It felt too early to call anyone, too late to sit idle. He needed to take action. He grabbed his coat and keys. He slung the notebook into his jacket pocket and left his phone on the desk, screen face down. If the phone was a conduit, it had to stay behind. He jogged down the stairs and bundled into his car. He drove to a 24-hour electronics repair shop a few miles away. The streets were quiet. Most businesses still shuttered for the night. He parked and entered the brightly lit storefront, greeted by rows of blinking monitors and tangled cables. A young technician looked up and offered a polite smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. Marcus exhaled. "I hope so," he said, voice low. "My phone, it's behaving strangely." He set his phone on the counter and explained the midnight text from an unknown number that left no record. He watched her expression shift from curiosity to concern as she probed the device and scanned logs. After 10 tense minutes, she looked up. "I don't see any message recorded," she said. "No log, no trace. It's like it never happened or it was erased before it wrote to memory." Marcus nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Can you trace it? Figure out where it came from?" She hesitated. "Not without the logs. And if it's erased itself, I can't do much. I can install stronger firewalls, monitor for incoming messages. But I can't find a message that's not there." Marcus felt the knot in his chest tighten. He thanked her and left the shop, the night air cold against his skin. He climbed into his car, started the engine, and stared at his phone on the passenger seat. The device felt inert, harmless now, but loaded with potential threats. He realized he was powerless to stop whoever or whatever had access to his life. Every barrier he created would be circumvented. He started the car and drove back home, mind racing with questions. He pulled into his parking spot and sat for a moment, engine idling, before stepping out. Inside his apartment, he closed the door behind him, locked every latch, and turned on every light. The hallway glowed, his security blanket against the shadows. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. He had survived the second warning text instead of tape, but the threat had grown, escaping its container and infiltrating his digital world. He lit a desk lamp and sat down. Notebook opened once more. He wrote, 5:47 a.m. Text warning, don't open IT. Message source, unknown, erased. Next steps, monitor devices. Find expert help. He tapped his pen against the page, staring at the blank space beneath. He realized the warnings weren't just messages. They were a game, and he was the only player. He closed the notebook and set it on the desk. The city outside brightened with the promise of morning, but Marcus felt only shadows closing in around him. Whether the next warning came by voice, text, or something more sinister, he knew one thing for certain. He could no longer ignore it. He would have to face whatever or whoever was stalking him before it was too late. Marcus perched on a wooden stool in his dimly lit kitchen. The notebook opened on the counter before him. Each page was dense with scribbles, timestamps, warnings, questions. He reread his last notes, tracing the thread from antiquated tape to vanishing text. The pattern was clear. The warnings were evolving, finding new channels to reach him, slipping past every barrier. He sipped lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste grounding him. Today, he decided, he would dig into the answering machine's past. Before he destroyed it, he'd noticed a small metal plate on its underside, an engraved serial number and the name Voicemaster Industries. If he could trace the manufacturer, he might uncover who once owned the device and why its messages followed him. He washed his cup, dried it, and grabbed his coat. Clutching the notebook and his smartphone now set to airplane mode, he drove to the local library. The crisp morning air did little to ease his mounting tension. Every parked car, every passerby seemed a potential lookout or messenger. Inside the library's reference section, Marcus made his way to the rows of microfiche and business directories. He located the 1987 edition of Electronics Manufacturers of America and, using the machine's model name, found a brief listing: Voicemaster Industries, based in suburban Illinois, operational from 1982 to 1993. He thumbed through back issues of local newspapers on microfiche. In a 1991 edition of the Lakeview Gazette, a small article caught his eye. Man found dead in apartment, no sign of forced entry. September 3, 1991, Lakeview Heights. Isle authorities discovered the body of Arthur Lane, 34, in his third-floor flat. Neighbors reported strange noises, tapping, whispering, emanating from his apartment's answering machine. No suicide note was found. Cause of death remains undetermined. Marcus's heart pounded as he read and reread the words. Arthur Lane, the same answering machine model. The article mentioned the impossible whispering voices none could explain. It seemed history was repeating itself in his own living room, voices from a recording, warnings of unknown dangers. He jotted notes in his notebook. Arthur Lane, 34. Died the 3rd of September 1991. Strange noises from answering machine, no forced entry. He scanned the surrounding microfiche, looking for follow-ups, perhaps a coroner's report or a deeper investigation. But the coverage ended after the initial report. Arthur Lane's death remained a chilling mystery. Marcus closed the microfiche viewer and stood. He needed more information, someone who remembered Arthur, who might have known the man or owned the machine after him. He checked the end of the article for a reporter's name, by Elaine Murdoch. If Elaine still lived locally, she might recall details beyond the death notice. He made his way to the public computers, signed in, and searched for Elaine Murdoch. Her name appeared in the Gazette's online archives. She had retired in 2005 and moved to Chicago. No contact information was listed. A dead end. But then he remembered the thrift shop where he bought the machine. The elderly shopkeeper had hinted at a tragic past tied to the device. Perhaps she had more to say, if prompted carefully. He closed his laptop and left the library, notebook in hand. On the drive home, he rehearsed what to ask. How had the machine come to her shop? Who had left it? Did she recall Arthur Lane? The questions swirled, but he felt a spark of hope, and covering the machine's provenance might reveal how its messages crossed decades to haunt him. Back at his apartment, he unlocked the door and flicked on the lights. The hallway felt claustrophobic, but he drew in a steadying breath. He made coffee and sat at the table. Phone out of airplane mode but on silent. He dialed the thrift shop's number found in yesterday's receipts. The line rang twice, then clicked. Yesterday's treasures, croaked the shopkeeper's voice. How may I help you? Marcus cleared his throat. Hello, it's Marcus Cole. I bought an answering machine from you a few days ago. I had some questions about it, about how it came into your shop. There was a pause, then that old thing sat on our shelf for years. A family dropped it off, said they didn't want it anymore. Couldn't tell me much, just that it didn't belong to them. Do you remember when that was? Marcus asked, heart thudding. She muttered. Couple years back, maybe 5 or 6. Might have been sooner. Hard to keep track. Did the family say where they got it? Or whom they bought it from? Another silence. Longer this time. They said they found it in an abandoned apartment. 3rd floor, I think. I tried asking more, but they got skittish, left it and never came back. Marcus's breath caught. 3rd floor. Arthur Lane's apartment was on the 3rd floor, the same floor. It all fit together. Lane's death, the machine's disappearance. Its resurfacing in the thrift shop, then into Marcus's hands. He scribbled furiously in his notebook. Machine abandoned 3rd floor. Unknown apartment. Approximately 2019. Likely Arthur Lane's former unit. He thanked the shopkeeper, who wished him luck, and hung up. Marcus stared at his coffee mug, now nearly empty. The line between past and present had blurred. The machine was Arthur Lane's, its tape still carrying warnings from beyond the grave or beyond time itself. He closed his eyes. He needed a new plan. If the machine's messages were warnings, they were tied to Arthur's fate. Perhaps Lane had tried to prevent something and failed. If Marcus could find Lane's apartment records or speak to neighbors from that era, he might learn what Lane knew and avoid the same end. He opened his notebook to a fresh page. Research, local records, building permits, tenant lists from 1991, interview neighbors, long-term residents who might recall Arthur Lane, locate old police coroner reports. He stared at the list, determination flickering in his chest. Tomorrow, he would visit the building's management office. He would unearth the past, no matter how dark, to save his own future. For the first time since the warnings began, Marcus felt a sliver of control. The hunt was on, and he would follow the clues wherever they led. Early the next morning, Marcus slipped out of his apartment and made his way to the leasing office in his building's lobby. The halls smelled of varnish and old carpet. He clutched his notebook, heart pounding with purpose. The manager, a middle-aged man with thinning hair, looked up from his papers as Marcus approached. Can I help you? The manager asked. Marcus explained he was researching a former tenant, Arthur Lane, from the early 90s, and needed building records, lease dates, apartment numbers, forwarding addresses. The manager frowned and thumbed through a ledger. Lane, yes, here, 3rd floor, Unit 3B, leased from January 1988 to July 1991. Forwarding address listed as unknown. We never got a new one. He tapped his pen thoughtfully. I can make copies for you, as a small fee. Marcus thanked him, paid, and left with photocopies rattling in a manila envelope. Back in his apartment, he spread the documents across his coffee table. Lease agreement, move-out notice stamped abandoned, cursory note, personal effects left behind. He tapped the note. Lane had left everything: furniture, personal items. The answering machine then disappeared. Was that the day he died? Or had he already been gone? The timeline blurred. A knock at the door startled Marcus. He froze, notebook in hand. The knock sounded again, soft but deliberate. His pulse leapt. The tape's warnings echoed in his mind. Don't let him in. He flicked his gaze to the peephole empty hallway. He closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. Logic whispered it was probably a neighbor or the package he'd ordered yesterday, but fear twisted his gut. He returned to the table, placed a thick book on top of the envelope to secure the papers, then slowly walked back to the door. His finger hovered above the lock. He could simply ignore it. But what if someone truly was at the door with answers? He glanced at the knob. A third knock, 3 taps, deliberate, exactly like the voice on tape had said. Doorbell rang 3 times. His chest tightened. He stepped back. No, he whispered. Then louder. No, thank you. He retreated to the couch, keeping the door in sight. From here, he could watch the peephole without being trapped at the door itself. Another knock, then silence. A muffled voice called out, "Marcus, it's me, Rick from 4A. I have your mail." Rick, his neighbor in 4A. Marcus exhaled, relief flooding him, but he remained cautious. He opened the door just enough to see his neighbor's face. Rick, a friendly contractor, held a stack of letters. "You've got some certified mail, looks important. I can't bring it up. It's heavy." Marcus forced a smile. "Thanks, man. I'll come down in a minute." Rick nodded and shuffled off down the hallway. Marcus closed the door and bolted. He sank to the floor, exhaling slowly. The warning had been real but also genuine. Rick really had his mail. His paranoia twisted every sound into menace. He retrieved his jacket and headed downstairs. In the lobby, Rick waited by the mailboxes. He handed Marcus a small pile of envelopes and a large, rigid yellow envelope marked certified signature required in bold red letters. "Here you go," Rick said. "Wanted to make sure you got it." "Thanks," Marcus replied, tucking the envelopes into his messenger bag. He bowed his head and hurried to the stairwell, anxious to be alone again. Back in his apartment, he set the envelopes on his desk and peeled open the certified one. Inside was a letter typed on official-looking letterhead from Henderson & Cole Insurance. It read, "Re-policy, no, 0451989, Dear Mr. Lane or current policyholder. Our records indicate that the above policy lapsed upon non-payment in August 1991. Premiums in arrears, $1,240. Please remit payment or contact our offices to update your policy. Sincerely, M. Henderson." Claims manager Marcus's throat went dry. Policy no. 0451989. 1989, the year Arthur Lane was paying his premiums. The letter had been addressed to Mr. Lane, but delivered to Marcus's address in 2025. The postmark, read July 15, 1991. He reread the lines. The policy lapsed the same month Lane disappeared. Was the insurance company trying to reach Arthur back then? Why send an obsolete letter now? The question burned in his mind. His pulse pounded as he rifled through the rest of the mail. A water bill from 1991, a postcard from a friend named Ella Murdoch thanking Arthur for helping proofread her article, postmarked June 2, 1991, all of it decades old, yet delivered today. He sank into his chair. The warnings, the messages, the texts, they were converging on Arthur's final days. The insurance letter, a demand for payment, had arrived. Was Lane under stress, hounded by creditors, property left behind? Each detail deepened the mystery. He exhaled. He closed his eyes and let the silence settle. Then he opened them and reached for his phone. He dialed the number printed at the bottom of the insurance letter, Henderson & Cole's branch in Lakeview Heights. The phone rang 3 times. An echo of the doorbell and a secretary answered. He explained he'd received an old letter for Arthur Lane and needed information. The secretary hesitated. Then, "Mr. Lane passed away in 1991. Records after that are sealed, family privacy laws. You'd need legal authorization." Marcus thanked her and hung up. He leaned back, blinking. There would be no official records without a lawyer's help, and that would draw attention and wanted attention. He needed another route. He stood and walked to the balcony. The afternoon air was warm. The city pulsed below. He stared at the street, thinking, if the warnings were tied to Arthur's last days, his stress, debt, the unanswered doorbell, perhaps Marcus could avoid the same fate by not answering his own door when summoned. By settling debts, by uncovering the pressure points. He closed. His eyes had made a decision. Tomorrow he would hire an attorney to request Lane's coroner report. He would investigate the cause of death and any mention of threats or creditors. He would follow Arthur's path backward to prevent Marcus's own undoing. He exhaled and returned inside, mind-steeled. The doorbell warning had come true in pattern 3 knocks, even if the outcome was innocuous. The unanswered door was not just a choice, but a shield. He settled at his desk and added to his notebook, certified mail July 15, 1991. Insurance lapse in Lane. Postcard the 2nd of June 1991. Mention of strange calls, action, consult attorney. Request coroner and police reports. He closed the notebook and looked up at the silent apartment. Each clue from the past pressed in on him, each warning a chance to change his future. And as evening fell, he realized that by heeding the voice on the voicemail, he still held the power to write the ending he wanted before the next warning arrived. Marcus sat at his desk long after dusk fell, the glow of a single lamp illuminating the yellowed pages of his notebook. He'd spent the day lining up every scrap of evidence, the answering machine's origin, Arthur Lane's vanished life, the uncanny pattern of messages and mail delivered decades late. Each new thread led only deeper into the shadows. Yet, in piecing it all together, Marcus felt an unsettling shift within himself, an erosion of certainty. As if the lines between his own identity and Arthur's were blurring, he rubbed his temples and stared at his reflection in the dark window pane. The streetlights outside cast fractured patterns across the glass, and for a moment he thought he saw another face behind his pale, hollow-eyed semblance, lips parted in a silent plea. He blinked hard. It was gone, just his own features, staring back, but the echo lingered in his mind. Not him, yet unmistakably him. He pressed his fingertips against his cheeks, tracing the contours of his face. Tomorrow's warning, she's wearing my face. The words tumbled through his thoughts. What did that mean? A doppelganger, a mask, or was it more literal, a stranger poised to step into his life and take his place? His phone vibrated on the desk, yanking him from his reverie. He reached for it instinctively, heart pounding, only to see a single notification: calendar reminder, dentist appointment, 8:30 a.m. It was his own voice, on a recorded alarm, reminding him of a routine checkup he'd scheduled weeks ago. The banal normalcy of it felt like a lifeline. He silenced the alert and set the phone face down. He stood and wandered into the living room, where the cardboard box that once held the answering machine sat tucked beneath the coffee table. He'd intended to toss it out, but something had stopped him. Some instinct whispered to preserve every fragment of this nightmare, no matter how small, for clues. He knelt and pulled it out, brushing off a fine layer of dust. Inside lay the damp, broken husk of the VoiceMaster 3000. Marcus ran a finger over its cracked plastic, half expecting a voice to whisper from the gears. He shook his head. It was dead, he was sure of it, but its echo persisted in every unexplained event, every message from the past and future. He turned back to the window, staring at his reflection again. The glass now mirrored the empty room behind him. Had someone followed him home, slipped in behind him when he looked away? The air around him grew cold, and he felt a subtle vibration like a heartbeat not his own. He spun toward the front door. Locks were fastened, chains in place. No one should be inside. Yet the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He took a cautious step forward, each footfall echoing in the stillness. Then, from the dim hallway, a soft click like the release of a bolt. Marcus froze, spine taut. The locked chain rattled, the doorknob turned. Slowly at first, then with deliberate force, a voice called through the door, a woman's voice, tender yet hollow. "Marcus, it's me." His blood ran cold. Not a neighbor's voice, not the shopkeeper. Something unfamiliar, yet intimate, an echo of the warnings. "Who is it?" Marcus's voice cracked, but he kept a firm grip on the doorknob, refusing to budge. "Please, open the door," she whispered. "I need to get inside." He glanced at the peephole, but steam had clouded the lens. He pressed a hand against it, but the glass was too warm to see through clearly. The voice was soft, insistent, coaxing him to trust. Yet the words from the tape echoed, "She's wearing my face." He stepped back, heart hammering. "I'm not opening," he said. "Who are you?" Silence. Then, muffled, a single word: "Marcus." He realized in that instant this wasn't Anna, the friendly barista from downstairs. It wasn't Rick from 4A, it was someone else, someone mirroring his name. The voice at once familiar and unsettling. Heard her footsteps slide across the floor just beyond the door. She was close. He couldn't be sure if she was on the other side of his door, or already inside, clothed in shadows. He grabbed the small umbrella stand at his side, brandishing it like a makeshift weapon. "Stay back." His voice echoed, hollow in the hallway. No response, just a quiet shuffling, the sound of breath. He strained to listen. Each exhale matched his own, each sigh a cruel mimicry. His chest tightened. He considered calling 911, but what would he tell them? "My doppelganger is trying to get in." They'd dismiss him as insane. Desperate, Marcus unhooked the chain lock and twisted the deadbolt. The door creaked inward, only a crack, enough to slip a hand through. He thrust the umbrella forward and asked, "Show yourself." The hallway lay empty. No footsteps, no figure. Nothing except the muted glow of the stairwell light down the corridor. He wiped sweat from his brow. Was he imagining it? Fatigued, paranoia made real. He closed the door fully, engaged the chain this time, and backed away. The walls seemed to pulse. He fled to the bathroom, turned on the light, and splashed water on his face. Staring at his reflection, he blinked until his eyes refocused. His skin was pale, his pupils dilated. He pressed his palms to the sink, bracing himself. He leaned close to the mirror and whispered, "You're okay. You're Marcus Cole. You're not her." He stared until his reflection looked solid, unmoving. This was his face, his real face. Yet a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that any moment the reflection might flicker and someone else would peer out, smiling sweetly, with hollow eyes. He backed away slowly. He realized with a jolt, the warnings weren't just about protecting his life, they were about saving his identity. Someone or something wanted to replace him, to wear his face and step into his life as him. His mind reeled. The answering machine had warned, "She's wearing my face." Now the text at his door had tried to lure him in. Tonight, she'd tried to breach his defenses. He had no idea where she'd come from, but she was real, and she was hunting him. Returned to his desk, blinking. He flipped to a new page in his notebook and wrote, his hand trembling, "Midnight incident. Unseen woman at door. Voice mimicked my name. Objective, protect identity and physical safety. Plan, install security camera. At entrance, do not engage without visual confirmation." He exhaled and looked around the silent apartment. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner a potential hiding place. The warning had come true, the fracture between his reality and that of the haunting. Messages had cracked too wide. He felt the edges of himself splintering. He shut off the lamp and retreated to his bedroom. Sleep was impossible, not now that the threat had become personal, corporeal. He lay on the bed, eyes open, listening for the slightest sound. The door stayed shut, chained tight. The hallway light cast a sliver of brightness under the crack. As he drifted into an uneasy half-sleep, he thought he heard soft footsteps outside, almost inaudible. He tensed, but the sound faded in the silence. Marcus understood. The true terror wasn't the messages from the future, it was the one who bore his face. The one who whispered his name, the one waiting for an invitation, and she would not stop until she got it. He shut his eyes, resolve hardening. He would guard the door, guard his identity, guard his life, and when the next warning came, he would be ready. Night had settled into a heavy hush when Marcus finally drifted into a fitful sleep. Dawn found him exhausted, eyelids fluttering open to pale light slipping through his blinds. His body ached from endless vigilance, but no shadow stirred beyond his door. He rose, every muscle stiff, and dressed in jeans and a dark hoodie. He moved to the living room and flipped on the desk lamp. The notebook lay open to the page where he'd sketched his plan. Install a security camera at the entrance. He'd researched a discreet doorbell camera online and ordered it immediately. A small box awaited unboxing on the coffee table with deliberate hands. Marcus unwrapped the camera's sleek black motor. He plugged it into a USB charger and waited for the power light to glow. A soft green blink confirmed life. He carried it to the hallway, drill in hand, and mounted it above the door. He ran the cable along the molding, tucking it neatly. The camera's lens pointed squarely at the peephole and locks it. Back inside, he connected the cable to his laptop and downloaded the companion app. Live feed flickered onto the screen. The empty hall, fluorescent bulbs overhead, scuffed carpet, nothing unusual. He tested motion detection. The camera beeped and captured a quick clip of him waving. Satisfied, he set the app to record on movement and to send alerts. He leaned against the wall, heart pounding. He'd done everything he could to see beyond the door. Now he just had to wait. The morning crawled by. He distracted himself by researching Arthur Lane further, scouring online forums, local history boards, and obituaries. He found a single mention. Arthur Lane, survivor of strange occurrences, passed away 91. No details. At 2:13 p.m., his laptop buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. Marcus snapped to attention and watched the playback. A dark figure approached his door, hand reaching for the knob, but the hall light flickered, and the figure receded into shadow. He rewound and replayed. Slender, the silhouette of a woman, hair long and straight. An uneasy chill raced down his spine. He paused the video and zoomed in. The figure's posture was confident. The gaze measured. Whoever she was, she knew exactly where to stand. He exhaled and leaned back. The camera had captured the second warning in a new form, a silent prowler. At his door, he scrolled through older clips. One showed a brief flash of movement at midnight, just after the moment he heard footsteps. Another, at dawn, revealed a figure standing still, almost waiting. He shut the laptop with a snap. He needed to understand who she was. Her face remained unseen, shadows and distance obscured features, but her intent was clear. She was the embodiment of the machine's warning. He skimmed his notebook and stopped at the note from Elaine. Murdoch's postcard mailed to Arthur in June 1991. Arthur, you must stop listening. They're watching. Don't trust the voice. He hadn't yet tracked down Elaine. Maybe she held the key to Arthur's knowledge of her. He grabbed the stack of building records and phone number for Elaine's publisher from the library. Research. He dialed the publisher's office and, after a pause, got a direct line to Elaine Murdoch. Her voice came through, softer now with age. Hello, Ms. Murdoch. My name is Marcus Cole. I'm researching Arthur Lane's last days. You wrote an article in 1991. He helped you, and you mailed him a postcard. I believe he knew something important. She hesitated. That was a long time ago. Arthur was always eccentric. He believed he could hear voices through his machines. I thought it was metaphorical. Her voice wavered. What makes you think there's truth to it? Marcus swallowed. Because I'm hearing voices too, and I'm not sure how much time I have before she comes for me. Another hesitation. The line was quiet for several beats. Then Elaine spoke, voice low. You must come to Chicago. There's someone there, Arthur's sister, Margaret. She lived with him. She'll remember. She warned me not to listen to his answering machine after the last message. Chicago, that meant travel, expense, risk, but it was his only lead. He drew a deep breath. I'll come, he said firmly. Thank you. He hung up and placed the phone on the desk with a decisive click. He packed a small bag, laptop, charger, notebook, jacket. He left an explanatory note on the kitchen table. Gone to Chicago. Back soon, MC. Before leaving, he checked the camera app one last time. The hallway lay empty, no movement. He locked the door, activated the chain lock, and began the journey north. As his car hummed onto the highway, Marcus's mind raced with possibilities. Elaine's sister, Margaret. What could she reveal about her? Was this the key to stopping the doppelganger who wore his face and hunted his life with every mile? His resolve hardened. He would uncover the truth of Arthur Lane's final warning, confront the entity tethered to the answering machine, and end the cycle once and for all. And if he failed, well, the voice on the voicemail would claim another life. The drive to Chicago unfolded in gray stretches of highway and restless thoughts. Marcus kept glancing at the notebook on the passenger seat where he'd scribbled Elaine's instructions. Seek Margaret Lane at 427 Elm Street. She'd said Margaret lived alone in her brother's old townhouse where the answering machine had once sat. He arrived just as the sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows down Elm Street's elm-lined sidewalks. The townhouse looked weathered but sturdy. Red brick, tall windows framed by peeling white trim. He parked on the street, jogged to the front door, and checked the camera app. The hallway image flickered to life, but there was no motion here. Prowler, no incoming threat. He squared his shoulders and rang the bell twice, mimicking the pattern the machine had once tracked. After a moment, the door cracked open and a frail woman peered out. Her hair was silver, her features lined with eyeshade, yet Marcus recognized her eyes, the same haunted glance he'd glimpsed when he stared at his own reflection in the dark window. "Margaret Lane?" he asked softly. She studied him, fear and recognition warring in her gaze. Then, gingerly, she stepped aside. "Arthur's voice. He said you'd come," she whispered. "Please come in." Inside, the house smelled of musk and lavender. Family photos lined the hallway. Arthur as a boy, Arthur as a young man, Arthur with Margaret at summer picnics. In each, his smile held a shadow, as though he knew things no one else did. Margaret led him into a narrow parlor where a battered answering machine, another Voicemaster 3000, sat on a side table, its cords wrapped neatly around it. "He brought this home after the insurance letter arrived," Margaret said, voice trembling. "He said it began speaking for him, voices from the future, messages he couldn't ignore." Marcus's breath caught. "Another machine. Here, untouched. You never destroyed it." She shook her head. "He wouldn't let me. He believed it was the only way to save himself. I hid it when he was gone." She gestured to a stack of folders on the coffee table. "I kept everything he recorded, his journals, the tapes, the police and coroner reports." He seated himself opposite her, heart pounding. Margaret lifted a faded binder labeled Arthur Lane Investigation and handed it across. "These are copies I made before everything was sealed. He believed someone was stalking him who wore his face." Marcus flipped the binder open. Inside were newspaper clippings, police statements, coroner's findings. He scanned frantically. Police report, the 4th of September 1991. Neighbors reported erratic behavior. Voices in the hallway. No signs of forced entry. Coroner's report, cause of death listed as acute heart failure, but an unexplained contusion on the right temple. Toxicology negative. Witness statement, Elaine Murdoch. "He called me frantic. He said he'd seen his own face in the dark window, heard his own voice saying, 'Let me in.'" Margaret's voice broke the silence. He thought the machine brought the warnings from his future self, but it was someone else. Something else, an entity tied to the machine's owner. He called it the Usurper. Marcus's pulse thundered. "The Usurper," she nodded. "It appeared whenever the machine's messages began. It watched him, mimicked him, stalked him until he invited it in, and then it took him." He closed the binder with a snap, so the warnings were genuine but incomplete. He couldn't outrun it. Margaret stood and moved to a side table. She lifted the answering machine's lid and pulled out a tape labeled Lane. "I've never listened to this," she said. "I was too afraid. But you might." She pressed the tape into his hand. "Take it. Maybe you'll find what he missed." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you." Outside, the sky was darkening. He realized how late it had grown, but he couldn't wait. He needed to hear Arthur's final words. Margaret pointed to a small guest room. "You can use that," she said quietly. "My neighbors know to expect you." He carried the tape and the second machine, still functional, into the guest room. The space was sparse, a single bed, a desk, a lamp. He set the machine on the desk, plugged it in, and inserted the tape. His fingers trembled as he pressed play. The tape spooled, and the robotic voice intoned, "Message 1." But the tinny hiss was overlaid by a second voice, Arthur's, ragged with fear. "It watches me in reflections. It copies my face. Don't let it cross the threshold. If you hear this, I've failed." The machine clicked to message 2. The echoing whisper, "It knows my thoughts, my memories. It will try to rewrite them. Hold on to who you are." He pressed fast forward to message 4. Arthur's voice, now urgent, pleading, "Find the pattern. 3 knocks, 3 rings, then the whispers will stop." The machine brings the warnings, but the Usurper can slip through any door, any device, break the chain. Marcus's breath caught the pattern. 3 taps, 3 rings. He'd done those himself, unwittingly following the clues. Arthur's final message, Lane final, crackled. "The answer is in the sequence. Trust the past to save the future." "I'm sorry." The tape snapped off. The machine announced, "End of messages." Marcus sat back, mind racing. Arthur's warnings were broader, not just, "Don't answer," but recognized the sequence. 3 taps, 3 rings, and the Usurper's doorway would close. The chain of messages across time, machines, and devices age a link. Break the sequence, and perhaps sever the entity's tether. He turned off the lamp and sat in the dim glow. He dialed Margaret's number from memory. When she answered, his voice was steady. "Margaret, thank you. I know what to do now." She sighed with relief. "Be careful, Marcus. It wants you, it wants your life. Don't let it in." He nodded, though she couldn't see him. "I won't." He left the tape and machine behind and drove back to his apartment as rain began to patter against the windshield. The pattern was clear: 3 knocks, 3 rings. He would anticipate the usurper's moves, disrupt its access, and end this cycle once and for all. Tomorrow would be the final confrontation, and Marcus was ready. Marcus pulled into his parking spot as dusk settled over the city. Rain-slicked streets glowed under street lamps, and the windshield wipers swept away the last few droplets. He gripped the steering wheel, mind racing with Arthur's instructions. Recognize the 3-knock 3-ring sequence and disrupt the chain. Tonight, he would confront the usurper for the last time. Inside his apartment, he flipped on every light. The security camera feed on his laptop glowed in the corner. The hallway carpet, the peephole, the locked door. No movement. He crossed to the desk and opened his notebook to the page. Marked sequence. 3 knocks gives 3 rings. He typed a quick reminder into his phone's reminder app and then paused. He remembered Elaine's warning about devices being compromised. He silenced his smartphone, set it to airplane mode, and placed it face down in a drawer. He would rely only on the answering machine's replica, now restored from Margaret's guest room, and his old landline phone. The replica voice master sat where he'd reassembled it, plugged into the wall. He inserted the tape and pressed play. Arthur's voice crackled. "It watches me in reflections. It copies my face. Don't let it cross the threshold." He pressed stop and unplugged the machine's power. He would use it only if truly necessary. He didn't want to invite the usurper via its warnings. Instead, he moved the recorder to the floor, directly beside his front door. If the usurper tried to use it as a conduit, he would trap its signal. **** Next, he set 2 timers on a simple, analog kitchen timer, one for exactly 7 p.m., another for 11 p.m. These would mark the expected windows of attack, based on his previous nights of disturbances and Arthur's pattern. He wound them both and placed them on the coffee table. It was 6:45 p.m. nearly. He brewed a strong pot of coffee, black, no sugar, and poured a mug. He sat on the couch, notebook open, coffee steaming at his side. The apartment felt unnaturally still, as if the darkness outside had been locked out by the lights within. At exactly 7 p.m., the first timer rang with an insistent buzz. Marcus exhaled and dropped what he was doing. He stood, heart pounding, and crossed to the door. He placed a hand on the knob and then knocked 3 times on the doorframe. Knock, knock, knock. Silence. He frowned. He stepped back and reset the first timer for 5 minutes. If this was the attempt, it had failed. If not, he would wait. 5 minutes passed. The timer buzzed again. Marcus nearly jumped out of his skin. He moved to the hall lamp and switched it off, plunging the hallway into shadow. Gripping the door handle, he knocked again 3 times. Deliberate, no response. Then ring, ring, ring. The old landline phone across the room began to ring, its bell loud and urgent. Marcus froze. The phone's ringing was the second part of the sequence. He glanced at his watch. 7:10 p.m. He stared at the phone, mind racing. According to Arthur, answering would invite the usurper across the threshold. He needed to break the chain. Without hesitation, he grabbed the phone and ripped the cord from the base, the bell falling silent with a final clang. He tossed the handset into the sink. He exhaled, pulse racing. The sequence had been triggered and thwarted. The usurper's attempt had been repelled. Marcus returned to the couch and stared at the dark cord in the sink, satisfaction mingling with unease. The entity had tried to cross. Marcus had refused it entry. He waited until the second timer chimed midnight. He sat rigid, mug untouched. When the final buzz sounded, he rose and moved to the door again. He knocked 3 times on the wood. Knock, knock, knock. In the dim hallway, he swore he heard soft footsteps approaching, slow and measured. He slammed against the door to brace it. At that moment, a faint vibration shook the floor on earthquake. No, a deep, resonant humming like the droning growl of machinery. The security camera feed jerked and flickered as the laptop screen glitched. The lights in his apartment pulsed. He flicked on the hallway lamp and checked the camera app. Nothing in the hallway except at the very edge of the frame. A blurred shape, tall and gaunt. Then the landline bell began to ring again, but he'd removed the cord. The source of the ringing echoed inside his skull, a droning mechanical chorus. He covered his ears, staggered back, and fell against the couch. The light snapped off, plunging the apartment into darkness. The humming intensified. Marcus's breath came in rasps. The sensation of being watched, of an immense presence pressing in, flooded his senses. He fought to his feet, groping for the flashlight he'd stashed beside the door. He clicked it on. A narrow beam of light pierced the gloom. He swept it across the room and froze. There, in front of him, stood a woman's silhouette, tall features obscured, a perfect replica of his own reflection from darkest nights. She raised a hand, mirroring his own grip on the flashlight. Her voice, a whisper from the doorway, slithered through the darkness. "Open the door." Marcus stared at her, mind whirling. This was the usurper's final bid: stand face to face and grant her entry. If he hesitated, the chain broken might reforge, but he recalled Arthur's warning, don't let it cross the threshold. He squared his shoulders. "No," he said, voice surprisingly steady. "Not tonight." The humming stilled, the lights flickered back on. The flashlight beam wavered across the empty room. The silhouette was gone. Marcus sank to his knees, chest heaving. The usurper, which had tried, and he had triumphed, defied her attempt to step into his life. The warmth returned to the apartment as the fluorescent hum resumed its normal pitch. He exhaled a long, trembling breath. The final warning had command he had answered. It correctly break the sequence and refuse the invitation. As the rain pattered against the windows, Marcus understood the battle was over. The usurper's power had been severed. He stood, muscles aching, and surveyed his apartment. Lights on, doors locked, devices unplugged. He was safe. For now, he sank into the couch, coffee long cold at his side. The whisper of static lingered in his ears. "Please believe me." He closed his eyes and let exhaustion claim him. The dawn would bring new challenges, reclaiming his life, explaining the madness to anyone else. But Marcus knew one truth above all when the final warning came. He had to listen, understand the pattern, and act with unwavering resolve. And tonight he had saved himself. Marcus woke before sunrise, every muscle sore and mind still buzzing from the previous night's confrontation. Though the usurper had vanished, its attempt to breach his threshold felt too close, too real. He dressed in quiet clothes, a dark hoodie, soft-soled shoes, and prepared for whatever might come in the night. Tonight, he decided, he would face the threat head-on. He spent the day fortifying his apartment's defenses. He added a second security camera at the opposite end of the hall, ensuring no blind spots. He reinforced the door jamb with a metal plate and installed a heavy-duty deadbolt. He placed wedges under the door and near the windows. He dusted 4 fingerprints around locks and handles, cataloging every print in his notebook. When evening fell, he turned off his phone entirely and left it in a locked drawer. He relied only on the analog kitchen timers, set now for 12 a.m. to 13 a.m. and for 44 a.m. key hours drawn from Arthur's and his own experiences. He kept a flashlight, pocket knife, and a small whistle clipped to his belt. He brewed a fresh pot of coffee and poured it into a thermos. He filled a mug with water and placed both on the coffee table. Every light in the apartment blazed. Lamps overhead, security lit. The apartment glowed like a fortress. At 11:50 p.m. he sat in the dim light of his desk lamp, flipping through his notebook. Key hours: 12 o'clock, 2:13, 4:44 sequence, 3 knocks gives 3 rings. Last defense, refuse entry. Break chain. He exhaled and waited. Shadows gathered at the window's edges, but the city's hum felt distant. When the clock struck midnight, the first timer buzzed. Marcus rose and approached the door. He knocked 3 times on the doorframe. Knocked and retreated to the couch. Pulse steady. No sound from the hallway. Instead, his landline phone rang softly 3 chimes. He stiffened but held firm. He reached into the sink, plucked the handset, and hurled it across the room, where it smashed against the wall and fell silent. A muffled crack echoed through the apartment. Marcus advanced on the door, flashlight in hand, ready to confront any intruder. He peered through the peephole. Empty hallway. He exhaled slowly, then returned to the couch. The silence was suffocating. He sipped coffee from the thermos. The heat burned his throat, reminding him he was alive and vigilant. At 2:13 a.m., the second timer buzzed. Marcus stiffened. This was the hour the usurper had first manifested in his own reflections. He turned off his desk lamp, plunging the room into darkness except for the security feeds on his laptop. He watched the live video. The hallway stretched out, empty, bathed in the dim green of his night vision camera. He glanced away, eyes heavy, but stayed alert. Suddenly, on the screen he saw a movement, a flicker at the edge of the frame. He leaned forward as a shadowy figure crossed the hall, gliding toward his door. No steps, no sound. His blood ran cold. He grabbed the flashlight and crept to the door, knees bent, ears straining. He aimed the beam through the peephole slit and caught a glimpse of the usurper's pale hand, reaching for the knob. His fingers tightened on his pocket knife. He knocked 3 times on the doorframe. Knock, then jammed the wedges firmly under the threshold. A wet crack sounded on the other side, as if something pressed against the door, straining. The knob rattled. The faintest whisper drifted through the crack. "Let me in, Marcus." He pressed his ear closer. He could almost see the shape of her face behind the door, his own features in soft, shifting focus. His heart thundered. He bared his teeth and yelled, "No." The pressure eased. He sensed to withdraw, footsteps receding into the darkness. He waited, breathing heavily, until the hallway fell silent. He returned to the couch, slid his hand into his pocket, and gripped the whistle. He considered blowing it, but the isolated shriek might draw unwanted attention. Instead, he settled for a long, steadying inhale. The apartment remained still. He kept vigil until 4:44 a.m. when the third timer buzzed. He rose once more and repeated the sequence. 3 knocks, then listened for rings. There were none. No answer, no bell, nothing but silence. He exhaled and turned on every light. The first rays of dawn crept over the skyline. He sat at his desk, muscles uncoiling as the world outside awoke. He checked the camera recordings. Every intrusion attempt was documented. 3 silent passages, each rebuffed by his refusal to grant entry. The usurper had tried and failed. Marcus leaned back, exhaustion and triumph mingling in his chest. The midnight showdown had ended on the usurper's power. Once tied to thresholds and reflections, had been broken. He gathered his belongings, footage, broken handset, wedge, notebook hand, prepared for sleep. Throughout the night, he had obeyed the warnings, mastered the pattern, and defended his life and identity. As he lay down, the apartment quiet at last, he realized that the voice on the voicemail had guided him all along. Some voices were never meant to be answered. He closed his eyes, resolved that the only reply he would ever give was one of unwavering refusal to let the usurper in. Marcus awoke to the steady glow of morning light filtering through the blinds. His body protested as he rose, every muscle stiff from the previous night's vigil. He glanced at the clock. 8:02 a.m. The early hour surprised him. He'd fallen into an exhausted slumber. No alarms had sounded, no intrusions recorded. The apartment felt undisturbed, peaceful. He poured a cup of weak coffee and carried it to the living room. The security feeds on his laptop showed only empty holes. After weeks of terror, the normalcy, it felt almost surreal. He sipped slowly, tasting the faint bitterness. Perhaps it was overdought. At 9:15 a.m. a soft chime came from the front door. Not a knock, an automatic doorbell, unfamiliar and electronic. Marcus froze, coffee halfway to his lips. He hadn't installed a doorbell camera, and he hadn't heard the building's entry buzzer since he moved in. He set down the coffee and approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, he saw a small package on the floor behind the door, no courier in sight. He flicked on the hallway light and unlatched the chain, leaving just the deadbolt in place. One breath, he swung the door inward. A white box lay on the mat, wrapped in simple paper. No return address. His name was scrawled in elegant black ink. Inside, he found an envelope, thick cardstock embossed with the date September 3, 1991. He slid out a single photograph, grainy, black and white Arthur Lane standing in his apartment doorway, answering machine at his side, eyes wide with panic. On the back, in Arthur's spidery handwriting, "I'm sorry I couldn't warn you more clearly. Break the chain, close the door. You've done well. But remember, the door is never truly closed." Marcus's heart clenched. The date matched the day Arthur died. The photograph showed the exact moment Arthur recorded his final warning. A chill raced down Marcus's spine. He examined the box further and found, taped beneath the lid, a tiny switch, no wires, just a metal toggle. His finger brushed it. He recoiled. His instincts screamed that this was a trap. Another method of intrusion. He closed the door and relocked the deadbolt, leaving the chain engaged over the box on the mat. The doorbell chime echoed faintly, as if mocking him. He returned to his couch, photograph and envelope in hand, and sank into the cushions. He read the note again. The door is never truly closed. A cold realization settled in his chest. The usurper's defeat last night might be temporary. The entity had found a new way to breach his boundaries, sending him artifacts from the past to test his vigilance. He studied the photograph. Arthur looked terrified. The answering machine sat by his side, silent. Yet the photograph itself was a conduit, an invitation across time. He felt its pull, a whisper behind his eyes. Open the door. Marcus closed his eyes. He would not be fooled again. He rose and took the photograph to his desk. Underneath, he placed it in a sealed envelope, then locked that envelope inside his filing cabinet. The box on the mat remained untouched. He made no move to remove it. He exhaled and stood by the window, watching the city pulse below. The usurper would not claim him. He had seen the final pattern, mastered the sequence, but he knew now that vigilance must never waver. The door might appear closed, but shadows could slip through cracks he couldn't see. He returned to his coffee, cold now, and sipped thoughtfully. The photograph and its warning would stay on his desk until he found a permanent solution. For now, he had won a battle, but the war continued. Days passed in a blur of cautious normalcy. Marcus resumed his routines with renewed gratitude: a morning jog, unpacking groceries, quiet evenings reading. He avoided stray reflections and refrained from answering unknown chimes. Each night he made the 3-knock ritual on his doorframe, then simulated the 3-ring sequence by knocking on furniture, ensuring the chain remained unbroken. He met with a locksmith to reinforce every entry point and hired an electrician to scan for hidden devices. He mailed Margaret Lane's original answering machine to a secure archive at the local historical society, accompanied by Arthur's final tapes. He hoped separating the artifact would sever the usurper's tether completely. Yet despite every precaution, a small unease lingered. He sometimes caught himself glancing at his reflection in the coffee pot or the dark windowpane to see another face staring back. He kept a folded copy of Arthur's photograph hidden in his wallet, a reminder of how close he'd come to falling prey. One evening his phone buzzed. Not a text, but a calendar alert. Dentist appointment. Oit we 30 antes do meio-dia. He stared at the screen, those own voice from months ago, scheduling a routine checkup. He smiled wryly, a benign echo of the past. He shrugged and silenced the reminder. He walked to his front door and peered through the peephole. The hallway looked unchanged, empty, spotlessly clean, the doormat gone. The mysterious box had vanished, leaving no trace. Had someone collected it, or had it disappeared on its own, swept away by the same forces that once animated the answering machine? He pressed his palm against the wood and knocked 3 times. Knock, 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 then leaned back, eyes closed. No chime, no ring, no whisper, just silence. He exhaled and unlatched the chain. Stepping into the hallway, he stood for a moment, breathing in the stale air, then returned inside and locked the deadbolt. As he closed the door, he caught a final glimpse through the peephole, a sliver of movement at the far end of the corridor, an indistinct shimmer, like a trick of the light. He squinted, but it was gone. Whether it was the last flicker of the usurper or simply his mind playing tricks, he could not tell. Marcus turned away, flicked on the lights, and returned to his living room. He picked up the photograph from his desk and examined Arthur's haunted eyes. The image seemed to ripple, as if alive. He whispered, "Thank you," and placed it in a locked drawer. He sat on the couch and cradled a warm mug of tea. The vessels of the past, the tapes, the text messages, the photograph had guided him here. They had shown him the pattern, the door, the face to fear, and he had listened. Whether the usurper still lingered on the edge of perception he could not know, but Marcus realized that some doors could never be permanently shut. Cracks always remained for shadows to seep through. Yet knowledge, vigilance, and a firm refusal to answer those whispered invitations were enough to hold the darkness at bay. In the deep quiet of his apartment, Marcus closed his eyes. The city hummed beyond the walls. Life had resumed its course. He sat silently until the last echoes of autumn night fell away, confident that, for now, he had written his own ending, one in which he remained himself, unclaimed by the voices on the voicemail.